So Baruch Hashem, that it's not only that the Rebbe's idea is being fulfilled, but the Rebbe's idea is reaching every Chassidische home, and probably many more Yiddish homes. That's definitely very exciting.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe so that others can enjoy it as well. In addition, if you've benefited in any way from Among Chassidim podcast and would like to give something back, you can do so today at derher.org/donate. I'm Yossi Kamen. Welcome to Among Chassidim by Derher, an ongoing farbrengen about life as a chassid, our vibrant connection with the Rebbe, and inspired living shaped by the way he teaches us each and every day. This episode is dedicated to Nishmas Harav Sadia ben Rav Mordechai Olav Shalom Dahan and the Refuah Shlema for Chana Bas Nechamed Dina by Shaul and Shendi Dahan. We experienced a few technical connection challenges during this recording, but we worked hard to make the final version as smooth and enjoyable as possible. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the episode. Bruchim Habayim, Rabbi Kaplan, how are you today?
Baruch Hashem, fine. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for making the time to be here. And the reason why I wanted to have a conversation with you, I think that there's a number of things we could discuss that I would be interested to discuss with you. And perhaps a different time we would do that. But for today's conversation, I would like to focus specifically on the amazing project that you were Aymed Bereish, and that is the Tanya Hasholaim that just came out. So let's do that.
Okay, I'd like to mention I'm Aymed Bereish in the sense of editing, but the Aymed Bereish of the project is Rebbe Chaim Sholbrook.
Okay, Rebbe Chaim Sholbrook, obviously, that Shmei Heilich Lefanov. So, but I think it says in the book. I think the title was there's a title for you that had that said that you were the initiator, the chief editor of the project.
Okay,
that's
the chief editor.
So,
that's right.
Okay, very good. So, before we get into this specific Tanya and the chiddush of it, I want to backtrack a little bit to Tanya Bechlal. So I think that may be a good way to today. Everyone that learns Tanya, usually they are introduced to it, they're being taught it, or they're learning it with some type of pirush. And I'm curious, when Alter Rebbe printed the Tanya, there was no pirushim on the Tanya, and I want to know. I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but in the first generation, or how were people learning Tanya right when it came out? Do you have anything to say about that?
Okay. At the time when it came out, there was what Alter Rebbe explains in Hakdomas HaMelakit, that the Tanya was really a continuation to private consultations which the Chassidim had with the Alter Rebbe during Yechidus. And the Rebbe says, it's not, I'm just giving out now a sefer and people should start learning the sefer. This is a continuous conversation. We had Yechidus, we're discussing, you're bringing your questions, your inyonim. So Chassidim at the time of the Alter Rebbe, they looked at the sefer not as we're starting to learn some kind of sefer. This is not the way the Alter Rebbe wanted them to look at it. It's a continuation of a conversation which the Alter Rebbe had with them. Just the conversation was moving from private consultation to the sefer. And this is why the Alter Rebbe explains in Hakdomas HaMelakit that the general rule, the Alter Rebbe begins with a question. The general rule is, Eino doime shmiya l're'iya o kriya b'sfarim. In other words, we are talking here about people who are discussing their issues, who want help in Avodas Hashem. And generally, Sfarim are very general they don't deal with the particulars of the problems and the challenges which each individual has. And this is why people are not interested in learning Sforim. They want to consult with the Rebbe, they want to hear it from the Rebbe directly. And the Rebbe explained the Tanya is different. Why is the Tanya different? Because the Tanya is not I'm just giving out a sefer. The Tanya is given out to people who I am already in touch with, who already came to me with their issues, and right now I'm just continuing the conversation with that sefer. So that's the way that the Rebbe had the Tanya in mind. We are talking here about people who have a background, not just a background of the inyanim which I mentioned in the Tanya, but a background of connection with the Alter Rebbe, and they see the Tanya as a continuation to that background. Now you would ask, okay, that's for that generation. What's for later generations? So really, the Rebbe says in Sichos that B'yodei Makirei Kamina refers not only to his generation, but to generations to come. They are all considered Yodei Makirai of the Alter Rebbe. But in practical terms, the Alter Rebbe says himself that those who are not able to, from the Tanya itself, the way it's given to them, they're not able to find and understand the individual instructions for themselves, so they should ask to the Gedolim Shebe'iroi V'heim Yevoinenuhu. In other words, the Tanya comes together with an oral tradition through the Talmidim of Alter Rebbe and from generation to generation. And indeed, there was from Rabbi Mendel that when you learn Tanya for the first time, it should always be from a teacher. You shouldn't just open Sefer Tanya and start learning, because the Tanya is just like there is Torah Shebe'al and Torah Shebe'al Peh. The Tanya is accompanied by a Torah Shebe'al Peh. The Tanya has to come with learning from a teacher. Now, if we are asking whether the Pirushim and Tanya and so on, whether they are a substitute for a teacher, I'm not the one to say that. Probably it's always better to start with a teacher, but maybe at least maybe some of it, maybe at least maybe some help there is also in learning with the Pirushim.
So it's not only a sefer, but it's a living document.
Yeah, that's really what the Akdamas of Malakit is all about.
Right. And I guess this leads us right into this Tanya that we're going to talk about, because a lot of the Tanya is Pirushim in the Tanya that are given by the Rabbeim. And obviously, if that's the way the Tanya is supposed to be, that there's an oral tradition to the Tanya as well, it makes perfect sense why there's so many Biyurim from the Rabbeim on the Tanya, besides the Biyurim that Chassidim give. Let's move on to this Tanya, Sefer Tanya Hasholaim. So I understand that the whole project and the final product that came out of the Tanya Hasholaim is based on a project that the Rebbe himself initiated and revealed that he was working on. So if you can please elaborate, what is that project that the Rebbe was working on? What did he say it is? What is it exactly?
Okay, so if we start from that, actually the story of the Tanya Hasholaim, we could start it from two angles, but you started it from here, so we'll go with that.
I only ask questions to guide you, but if you want to start from a different angle, Adarabah.
Okay. No, let's start with this.
Okay.
The Rebbe printed the Tanya for the first time in Tafshin Yud Dalet, 1954. And then the Rebbe added at the end of the Tanya Mafteches and Risofes and Tikunim and so on, and there was a Pesach Dovel. The Rebbe wrote an introduction to those Mafteches. And there the Rebbe writes about his plan. It's actually, this is printed in every single Tanya, printed from Tafshin Yudal until today. There is this Pesach Dovel with the outline of the Rebbe's plan. And the Rebbe says that Kehoth is working on a plan of Hitzoas Tanya Hasholaim, a complete edition of Tanya, which will include, and the Rebbe names 3 things. One is Mari Mekoimus, obviously, references to sources and so on. Then a Pirush Kotzo, a short commentary on the words of the Tanya, and Likut Pirushim Merabeseinu Nesiyenu, a collection of biurim, explanations, interpretations, chidushim of the Rabbeim and the Tanya. And this, the Rebbe writes about this plan. It's printed in every single Tanya since, and the might of the plan will never materialize. But the Rebbe himself, there was actually the Reshimis of the Rebbe. The Rebbe himself wrote Mara Mekoimis and Horis and the Tanya. They were printed in the series of the Reshimis. And they were meant to be probably part of that project, but the direct relationship between these 2 projects is not completely known. In other words, there is this general project to give out a Tanya Hasholaim, a complete edition of the Tanya, and then there is Mari Mekoimis and Neores, which the Rebbe wrote himself, which obviously were to be incorporated in somehow in that complete edition, but the exact relationship between the 2 is not known.
So you're saying because the Rebbe wrote those Rishimis much earlier than when he wrote that he's working on this Tanya Hasholaim.
Mostly, yes. Almost all, probably over 90% was written earlier, even though the Rebbe kept adding more and more Ha'oris, some of them probably even after the Pesach level. But yes, probably over 90% is written before that Pesach level. Anyway, it's definitely that when the Rebbe writes that he is going to give out this, it is planning this Hitzoas Tanya Hasholaim, obviously it would have been incorporated in it one way or another. But an actual Hitzah of the Tanya Hasholaim, it didn't advance. And later year, I think in the early Tafshin Lamed, the Rebbe instructed Rebbe Aaron Chitrik, who was the head of Oitzer Chassidim at the time. And the Rebbe told him to edit Mari Mekoimis and Likut Pirushim and the Tanya. And again, there was a discussion exactly in what way to do it. It ended up being that it was printed not on the page of the Tanya, because I forgot to mention, and the Pesach Dober, the Rebbe said, there was writing that the plan is it should be actually on the page of the Tanya in the middle, and everything else surrounding it. And the Tanya by Rebbe Aaron Chitrik, it was printed in booklets. It was the Perik Tanya, just the way it is, and afterwards the whole Mari Mekoimis, Likut Pirushim, and so on. However, it did see. Some people thought that this Tanya, in other words, this Kuntesim, these booklets and the Tanya by Rebbe Aaron Chitrik, that's really where the plan was going. In other words, the plan was changed from a plan of having in Tanya surrounded by Pirushim to this Tanya, which would be given as the Perik Tanya, and afterward the collection of the Pirushim. But recently, actually, there was a letter from the Rebbe written around that time, a short while after the Tanya of Chittik started coming out. So there is a letter which the Rebbe wrote, it's printed in Igros Kodesh, What's interesting, we did not know about this letter when we started the project. We found it just a couple of years ago, where the Rebbe says clearly that the reason why the original project is not yet happening is mipnei roi v'tirdos. In other words, because I don't have the time for it. And he says that the project of Rabbi Chitrik is a haschola umein. In other words, that's not fulfilling the project the way it's supposed to be, but being that the project is not yet happening, so as a beginning, something which is somewhat similar to that project, this was the Tanya of Rabbi Chitrik.
So is the project supposed to be the completion of what the Rebbe's project that the Rebbe wanted to do, or it's supposed to be something else? Maybe take it from there.
So eventually, the project did not start as a project to fulfill the Rebbe's plan of Tanya Hasholaim. This is not how the project started. This is the second angle which I was trying to get to. The project started, and I wasn't part of it yet, with the Reshimis, Rebbe's Reshimis on the Tanya. The Rebbe's Reshimis were found after Yom Tammuz in the Rebbe's room. Nobody knew about it before. It was found at the time. And just like there are other, together with a few other Reshimis and other things, there was also a special booklet which had Reshimis on the Tanya. And it came out, the Rebbe gave it the name, Mare Mekoimois Hagois Ve'oris Ksoris Sefer Shel Beinonim. And this is how it came out in booklets of Reshimis. Now, when it was given out, it was published by Vad Anochis Velahak under Rabbi Chaim Sholbrook, as I mentioned. And when they edited the Reshimis, they decided, again, I wasn't yet part of it at the time, they decided just in order to be a Davar Sholem, to be a little more than just the Reshimis themselves, to add a collection of Pirushim, other Pirushim from the Rebbe and the Tanya. So that edition of the Reshimis, so there was the Tanya, it was surrounded by the Reshimis, and additionally, there was a likut of biurim of the Rebbe and the Tanya collected from all Mugedike Siches and Ma'amorim and from the Rebbe's letters. This was published at the time, in the early noon 1990s, under the Mare Mekoimois Hagoyes Ve'oris Ksoris. Then go some 15 years later, there was interest in publishing a new edition of those Reshimis. And Rabbi Brook and probably others thought that it would make sense to expand that Likut Pirushim. It should include not only the Mogadike Pirushim, but also from the other Biurim of the Rebbe, from Sichas V'Shanat Moge, Mamorim V'Shanat Moge, and also to update with things which came out after that and so on. And that's the first time when I got in the picture. The idea was to expand that Likut, which was published with the Reshimis, and to add to it other biurim from the Rebbe, which weren't included in that original Likut Pirushim. And then once, and I was asked, even before they actually started to run the project, they asked me to make a sample of a few sample Pirushim, how it would look like. And then they came out with the idea, since we are adding Pirushim of the Rebbe, and since we know that the Rebbe had an idea of adding Pirushim from Rabbi Tzedek Nesienu in general, why not add also Biurim from Rabbi Tzedek Nesienu? At that time, the idea wasn't to fulfill the exact idea of the Tanya Hasholaim, but just to expand the liquid pirushim, which was printed in the Rishimis, together with other pirushim of Rabbi Nasiya. Initially, I was asked to make a sample, and then our book secured funding, and he started to run this project. What happened since is, really at that time, no one imagined the scope of this project. In other words, if you ask someone, how many biurim of the Rabbi Nasiya are there on Sefer Tanya? Now, obviously, if you want, the entire Chassidus is a Pirush on Tanya. Tanya is Teresh B'Chsav. So everything, you can give out an entire encyclopedia of Chassidus and call it a Pirush on Tanya. So obviously this is not what was meant. It was meant only things which are specifically written on the Tanya, which refer to Tanya, not general biurim. For example, if in Tanya Perek Gimel towards the end, there was a few words about Das, so we're not going to put everything which Chassidus says about Das as a Pirush on that Tanya. You can't do that. The idea is just things which are direct Pirushim, which refer to the Tanya itself. So I thought, how many Pirushim are there? So, okay, it was imagined as maybe a 2-year project or so. But once we started actually working in it, we realized that it's much, much more than that. In other words, even before I started working, a group of Bochrim and Yungelite were hired just to make a mafteach. In other words, to look through all the Sforim of the Rabbeim and just make a list, a mafteach of where there are biurim of Tanya. So as a preparation for the project, Rabbi Brook gathered a group of Bochum and Yungelai to prepare a mafteach, which means just to go through all of the storim of the Rabbeim and see wherever anything is mentioned about the Tanya. They didn't have to learn it, but just go through it and see wherever the Tanya is mentioned, and to prepare just the mafteach based on the pokim. For example, Tanya Perek Gimel is mentioned here and here and here and here and here and so on. And once the mafteach was ready, which was actually, we started the project was already running at the time. The mafteach was done while I was still working on the Rebbe's biurim. The mafteach for the biurim of the Rabbeim was being prepared, and with the time we started realizing that it's a really serious project. And then with the time, somehow the realization came that what we are really trying to do here is we are trying to get as close as possible to the Rebbe's original project, which the Rebbe spoke about in his Pesach Dover and Tafshin Yudalet. So basically, around the middle of the project, maybe not the middle, but definitely after the beginning, the idea changed from printing the Rebbe's Rishimis with additional biurim from the Rebbe and maybe from the other Rebbeim, but to trying to get as close as possible to the Rebbe's plan of Tanya Hasholaim, which meant, for example, first of all, that there would be a need to add other parts. For example, the Rebbe's plan included a Pirush Kotzer, meaning in addition to the biurim of the Rabbeim, a running commentary on every word of the Tanya. This was part of the Rebbe's original project. We didn't start with this in mind. And also, being that right now it's not anymore a Reshimeth with additional biurim, but the general concept of Likud Pirushim and the Tanya which the Rebbe had in mind. So it didn't make sense anymore to have the Reshimas separately and the Likud Pirushim separately. The Reshimas also had to be incorporated in the general plan. And also there was a reason for that, because in some cases in the Reshimas the Rebbe is discussing the same issues which he is also discussing in Sichos or in Mamorim later. And the conclusions are not always exactly the same, or maybe maybe with added context and so on and so forth. So in the Reshimas, the Reshimas are printed separately, and then there was a Likud Pirushim separately. And if you learn each of them separately, even though sometimes they are touching upon the same subject. And here the idea became to incorporate everything in the same Likud Pirushim. So once the idea came up, okay, we are trying to get as close as possible to the Rebbe's Tanya Hasholaim. Okay, so what are we going to do with Pirush Kotzar? Who is going to write a Pirush, a commentary on the Tanya? So again, this is also something which Rabbi Brook found. Everyone knows there is the Shiurim B'Sefer Tanya, which started as the Shiurim which Rabbi Yosel Weinberg gave on the radio, and which were then Mugad, the Rebbe edited the actual pages of the Shiurim from which Rabbi Weinberg was giving his Shiurim, and was later printed in the Sefer, which the Rebbe's encouragement, the Rebbe spoke a Sikh about it.
Among Chassidim is brought to you by Chassidische Der Herr. We live in a chaotic world, a world where for us Chassidim is a seinu, lei ra'inu, we do not have the ability to hear and see the Rebbe on a daily basis. Yet we know that the Rebbe is very much with us, and the Chassidus Chabad is alive and thriving more than ever before. One needs to only tap into it. Chassidische Der Herr provides you and your family with the tools necessary to tap into all of this. Whether it's the monthly magazine, the way it all began, whether it's Der Herr books, Der Herr online content, and so much more. Men, women, and children throughout the world benefit and use these tools on a daily basis. Whether it's children enjoying the children's magazine that comes along with the regular Der Herr, or enjoying the children's podcast, whether it's Bachrim in yeshivas receiving the Der Herr, whether it's girls in high schools enjoying Der Herr club in their local high school. People all over the world and from all walks of life enjoy and utilize these tools and take advantage of it. If you're not already subscribed to the Herr Monthly Magazine, do so today at derher.org. That's derher.org. Der Herr is a dynamic organization which is committed to continue providing these tools, grow on a constant basis, and do all that we can to help this effort. Baruch Hashem, it takes a lot of resources and finances to make this all happen. You can be part of Der Herr through your financial support as well, through visiting our website derher.org, or through contacting us to setting up a meeting. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. So how did that work? Rabbi Weinberg would prepare the shiurim, and then he would write the shiurim, give it to the Rebbe, and then the Rebbe would give Haggais, and then the Rebbe would give it out, and he would give the shiur from that.
Yeah, exactly like that. He would write the shiurim. He prepared himself. He wrote his shiur word by word. He wasn't like during the shiur just freely talking. He wrote word by word what he was going to say. It was typed in a typewriter, and he gave it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe edited it and gave it out to him before the shiur. In fact, these pages are readily available. They are online. Everyone could see the Rebbe's Haggais and those shiurim. Now then, in the Tafshin Mem in the 80s, I think, came out the story. And the Sefer Shiurim, the Sefer Tanya, then also translated to English lessons in Tanya and to Hebrew. So so the Sforim didn't get their own Hagoy from the Rebbe. But they are re-edited based on those Shiurim which had the Rebbe's Hagoys. And the Rebbe, and when it came out, the Rebbe spoke a sikh about it, and the sikh is actually printed in the first volume of Shurim Sefer Tanya, right in the beginning. And here the Rebbe describes the Shiurim Sefer Tanya using the Yiddish words akurz and pirush, a short commentary, which is exactly the same words which the Rebbe is using in his Pesach Tovo, describing his plan, where he writes in Hebrew it should be a pirush kotzer, a short commentary. So the idea was, okay, that's where the pirush kotzer has to come from. We have to take the Shiurim Sefer Tanya and turn it into the pirush kotzer and the Tanya. So this is how this the second part of this project, in addition to the Likut Pirushim, we had the shiurim of the Shiurim Sefer Tanya were incorporated as a commentary on the Tanya.
So it's not Shiurim Sefer Tanya directly. It's kitzer of Shiurim Sefer Tanya. It's like shortened.
It's not. I wouldn't say it was shortened, but it was retranslated and edited. In other words, the Sefer wasn't exactly the same as the shiurim which the Rebbe was Magia. There was a different editing, a different project. There were things were added, and so on. What we did, we decided, we start from the beginning. We'll take the pages, as we said, they are available, the pages with the Rebbe's Hagosh, and we'll start from there. And I wouldn't say we shortened it, but we did change things based on the idea that these are not anymore shiurim to be told orally, but they are a sefer. They are the pirush and the sefer. So, for example, when you give a shir, sometimes you repeat things a couple of times, especially if it's an idea which is a new idea or an idea which is not easy to get or understand. So you repeat it a couple of times, and the Rebbe would write it actually a couple of times, one after the other. So in this case, we omitted some of those repetitive explanations. Also, for example, if you take the Shurim Sefer Tanya, you would see that many times at the end of the Perek, there is a story. Or in other places, there is a story. How did the story came in? That's a shiur given on the radio. At the end of the shiur, Rabbi Weinberg would conclude sometimes with a story which had to do with the issue in point. There's no need for those stories when you are printing out a pirush and the Tanya. So yes, we did go through the entire shiurim Sefer Tanya from the original pages, and we retranslated it because the translation of the shiurim Sefer Tanya in Hebrew, which is available, didn't exactly fit the style of the sefer, so everything had to be translated again. And we edited it in a way which would fit with for the sefer. Another point is, we mentioned the Hagoyos of the Rebbe to the Shiurim Sefer Tanya. Now, those Hagoyos, some of them are indeed printed in the Sefer Shiurim Sefer Tanya. You will see on the bottom there are sometimes Heore from the Rebbe, and you have the Loshen, the words of the Rebbe, and they are translated to Yiddish. So some of the Heores are indeed incorporated in the Sefer. But some of the Rebbe's Hagoyos are not like long Heores, but they are corrections and smaller additions to the shiur, and those were incorporated in the shiur as just part of the shiur, and nobody knows. You wouldn't know from reading the Shiurim Sefer Tanya what are the ideas which the Rebbe added. That's something which you only see in the original pages. So what we did in the Shurim Sefer Tanya, when we wrote the Pirush Kotzer, is that in addition to writing, translating, and editing the actual Pirush, whenever there is a Agor from the Rebbe, even if it's the smallest Agor, it was also added separately in the Likud Pirushim. So we know these words are not just part of the Shir, they are actually in addition the Pirush of the Rebbe and the Tanya. Also, when the Sefer was published, we don't know exactly how much. In other words, it wasn't edited. The Sefer wasn't edited by Rabbi Weinberg himself. It was given to other editors to work on. And it seems, especially when we look through the pages, they weren't always aware of the full meaning of every Agor of the Rebbe. So we had to read all of those Agoros immediately from the Ksaviyat Kodesh to see exactly how they fit in. For example, sometimes the Rebbe is changing a pshat from one thing to another. So we had to go through Be'iyun, through every word of the Shurim Sefer Tanya, every word of the Rebbe's Agoros, and based on that, we added both the Pirush and also we added it in the Likud Pirushim. Now, that time when we were working on that, that's when Rabbi Brook found that letter in which the Rebbe clearly says that the Tanya Hasholaim is still on the table. It just, we didn't have a time yet to do that. And the Rachitic project is only a beginning of that. So this obviously encouraged us to try as much as possible to get as close to the Rebbe's original plan. So indeed in the Tanya Hasholaim we have all of the three Medurim, all of the three parts which the Rebbe spoke about in the Pesach Dover. We have the Pirush Kotzer, which, as we said, is based on the Shurim Sefer Tanya and the Rebbe's Agoros. We have Mare Mekoimos. Now, those Mare Mekoimos are also based mainly on the Rebbe's Reshimas, because the Rebbe's Reshimas include many Mare Mekoimos, also on Mare Mekoimos from the Tzemach Tzedek, and we added more Mare Mekoimos where it was necessary. And then there is the Likud Pirushim, which incorporates everything, both Chidushim of the Rebbe from the Reshimas, from Siches, from Amorim, from the Hagoros and Shurim Sefer Tanya, and also the Pirushim of other Rebbeim. So this is how the Tanya Hasholaim came into being. Another way, again, we didn't plan on. Nobody sat and said, "Okay, the Rebbe wanted to give out Tanya Hasholaim, let's do it." No, that's not how we started. We started in one way, but then eventually we got into it, trying as much as possible to fulfill the Rebbe's kavanah. So again, we can't say that this is the Rebbe's Tanya, which the Rebbe actually meant. We don't know exactly, but we can try. We can say that we tried as much as possible to get as close as possible to fulfilling the Rebbe's plan.
So, what is the firstly, did the Rebbe have in mind to, according to you, what you're understanding, was the Rebbe's kavanah to have a likut of pirushim of all of the pirushim of the Rabbeim of the Tanya, like there is in the Sefer Tanya Hasholaim, or do you think the kavanah was to have like a selected likutim?
Well, I can't say that for sure, because as far as I remember, the Lashon Pesach Dover does not say all of the pirushim. But I think even when when the Rebbe gave Rabbi Chitrik instructions about how to prepare his chibur, on the Tanya, so I think the Rebbe did tell him to not to make a collection, but to put everything. And indeed, Rabbi Chitrik added everything which was available at the time. By the way, since we're talking about 50 years ago. Since then, there are things which weren't printed yet, which are printed now. Many more Sforim and many more sources. But I think what Rabbi Chittik did try to collect everything which existed at the time in print. Yeah. So based on that, we did. So So we can't say for sure this is what the Rebbe meant, but that's the way we did our work. We're trying to get everything which is possible from the Rabbi Mendel Kaplan.
And the Likut Pirushim of the Rabbeim, is it the Lashon Harav, or it's a rewritten based on the Pirushim of the Rabbeim?
Okay, so here we had let's go back to Rabbi Chitrik's Tanya. And the Rebbe said this was Rabbi Chitrik's Tanya is Haschola Emeyein. In other words, it's not fulfillment of the project, but it's a beginning and something which is similar to the project. And I think, why is it only in the beginning? I think at least part of it has to do with this. In other words, you wouldn't see, it's not very common to see someone taking Rabbi Chitrik's Tanya and starting learning from it. It's used mainly for research. Yeah, you want to know what's there, so you can't. It's not something which you could open and learn. And one of the reasons is because Rabbi Chitrik, in other words, based on whatever was available at the time, it seems he was the head of Marechet Tzitz Chassidim. He couldn't put his entire time on this only. So Rabbi Chitrik is indeed, we could call it. It's a copy and paste version, so to say. In other words, wherever there is something from one of the Rebbe and the Tanya, he would copy it the way it is and put it in place. For example, if the Rebbe Rashab speak about a certain, which is very common, by the way, speaks about a certain part of the Tanya and different Mamorim. Now, sometimes it's never exactly the same word for word. Even the biur is not always exactly the same. Sometimes it's different biurim, sometimes other wording. So he would put one next to the other. This piece, and this piece. So you had all the sources in front of you, but you didn't have really. You couldn't make of it. So we already in the beginning of the project, we're discussing whether we should keep the Lashon Harav exactly the way it is, or with minimal editing, in order to make it more accessible, more possible to open the Tanya and sit and learn from it. And the decision was made. There was a discussion. It wasn't me. There was a Mareches. There was a discussion, and it was decided the purpose of this Tanya is for people to be able to open the Sefer Tanya and learn it with the biurim of the Rebbe. And for this, we have to make it as easy to learn as possible, even at the expense of keeping the exact Lashon Harav. Now, I want to elaborate on that. We didn't take Lashon Harav, we didn't translate it to a different language, or even we didn't write it, for example, in modern language. It's not me'ubad. We're not trying to make something which is different from the Lashon Harav. The language, the style, is the style of the Rabbeim and Sefer Chassidus. We didn't change the style or to make it more modern or different. But in order to make it easier to learn, we did bring together biurim from different mamorim, from different sources, to make it one thing. We did add a few words here and there to make it easier to understand. Obviously, we didn't add pirushim. We added just connections or changed a little the order, anything which is meant just to make it easier to understand how the pirush goes. Whenever we felt that we need to add a little more than that, in other words, if you read the pirush the way it is, maybe you wouldn't understand, and we need to add additional explanation. We didn't add it inside. There was a ora, and in the bottom we wrote it could mean this and this, and we added and made it clear that this is from the Motzi La'or. This is our suggestion. We didn't add inside any substance which is not from the Rebbeim. But we did edit a little bit the language to make it more accessible and easier to understand. For example, let's take the Rebbe's Reshimas. The Rebbe's Reshimas are written very, very short in code. You print it the way it is, it's very hard to learn. So yes, we have to add a few words to make it easier to understand. But again, not words of substance, but words which makes it easier to learn and understand what it is. So again, we didn't keep the Lashon Harav exactly. We kept the style of Lashon Harav, but in order, and these things make it more easier to understand. And we think this is possibly one of the reasons why we don't know exactly what the Rebbe's plan was, but from the Rebbe saying that Rabbi Chitrik's project was a me'ein and a this seems to indicate that the Rebbe wanted more than just copy and paste of pieces, but something which is a clearer pirushim and the Tanya, which could be learned easily with the Tanya. So that's the approach which we took, and this is how the Tanya Hasholaim is.
Okay, very good. So I want to zoom out a little bit because you said a lot of different things of what the Tanya incorporates. So if you open up the Tanya, can you go through how it looks and what each section is?
Okay. Should they actually be? There's a safe actually. I can open a safe, but I don't know if it's. You wouldn't be able to see much probably in the.
We could try. We'll see. We'll see if it goes through the camera. We can see if it works.
Let's try. You see anything here? Okay. Okay. So here is an example. We start from the beginning of a perik. That's, for example, this is perik Zion. So as you can see, in the Sefer, each perik is separate and has its own sharblat. This is a sharblat of perik Zion. We added here, the piece here is actually from the Shurim B'Sefer Tanya, because Rabbi Weinberg, in the beginning of each perek, before he started actually learning the perek inside, he would give some kind of introduction about the perek. Actually, he started it a little later, not from the very beginning, but afterwards it became a seder. And this is printed in the Shurim Sefer Tanya in the beginning of each perek. So we took this part and we put it right in the sharblat of each perek. Where it was missing, in some places it was missing, so we wrote our own. But generally, this is from the Shurim Sefer Tanya, introduction to perek Zayin. Then you open the perek itself. So here you see this is the Tanya inside. Under the Tanya, right under the Tanya, is the Mareh Mekoimos. Again, some of them from the Rebbe, from the Tzemach Tzedek, and some we added. And under the Mareh Mekoimos, there are actually a section of Ha'oris and the Mareh Mekoimos, which is where we brought probably quotes from the Mareh Mekoimos when it was important and so on. So that's the Mareh Mekoimos, and these Pinuchim quotes from those Mareh Mekoimos. Then on the side, here it's only on this page, and other pages it goes to the other page too. That's the Pirush Kotel. That's from the Shurim B'Sefer Tanya. It's parallel to the Tanya itself, so you learn the Tanya and you can learn it with the Shurim around it. And a large print is the words of the Tanya, small print is the Shurim. And then in the bottom, starting on the bottom and continuing to the next page, that's the Likud Pirushim. You have the first one has an Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and so on, and then the Ha'oris and them. Sometimes, in certain pokim, the Likud Pirushim is very long. You have pages, not here, you have pages, let's say, in Perek Aleph, or here, Perek Beis. You have pages which are entirely the Likud Pirushim, because there are parts where there are many Pirushim in. And then, in the end of every Perek, not in most pokim, there is a Kitzur. What's the Kitzur? That's from the Kitzurim and the Ores of the Tzemach Tzedek. We know that Tzemach Tzedek wrote actually two versions of Kitzurim and Tanya, in addition to Ores, and the Rebbe printed them in the Sefer Kitzurim ve'Ores. The Rebbe actually gave it out to everyone, I think, in Tafshinun. So the Tzemach Tzedek wrote the Kitzur on every Perik. So the Kitzur of the Tzemach Tzedek is printed at the end of every Perik. So that's basically how it works. You see there is the introduction. The introduction is really part of the Shurim Sefer Tanya. And inside we have the three parts, the Maramekoimus and the bottom, right under the texts, and the side, the Pirush Kotzar, and the rest of the Likud Pirushim. And towards the end of every Perik is the Kitzur from the Tzemach Tzedek where it exists.
In the back of the Chelik Beis, I saw that there's a very rich and beautiful pictures of Kisvei Yad from the Rabbeim, from the Rebbe. So what are those inyanim that are in the back of Chelik Beis?
Okay, that's a skira. This is because the Sefer, as we said, is taken from the biurim of all of the Rabbeim and the Tanya. So we decided that now the biurim of the Rabbeim and the Tanya are divided, let's say, into two parts. There are some biurim of the Rabbeim which are written specifically on the Tanya. The main ones, we know the Kitzurim ve'Ores of the Tzemach Tzedek. That's actually Ha'ores, which the Tzemach Tzedek wrote on the Tanya itself, directly referencing the Tanya. That's Chibur on the Tanya. There is also from the Rebbe Ashab. And, for example, there are Mamorim, which is the Bura Maschil of the Maimer as Lehovin Mashakosov Betanya. It's specifically written on the Tanya. Actually, from the Alter Rebbe, there are multiple Mamorim from the Alter Rebbe, which the beginning of the Maimer, the purpose of the Maimer, so to say, is to explain a certain part of Tanya. And then there are the Pirushim, which are just scattered all over, and many Mamorim and Sikhs. So we decided that's really also based on the way the Rebbe published the Kitzurim ve'Ores. At the end of the Sefer Kitzurim ve'Ores, the Rebbe himself wrote a skira on the different manuscripts, Kisvei Yad, where it was published from, and so on and so forth. So based on that, we thought it would make sense here too to add such a skira, description of the sources which we have from the Rabbeim. So obviously the description can't include all the Mamorim and Sichos, but those Hiburim which refer specifically on the Tanya, a description of where it comes from, what are the Maramekemes, what are the manuscripts, and so on and so forth. So that's in the back of the Tanya we've printed such a description of all the sources, starting from the Alter Rebbe, the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, which are directly on the Tanya, with a few with copies from them. These are not copies from the Alter Rebbe's Ksav Yad, because the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, almost all of them, the Alter Rebbe didn't write himself, but some of them are Ksav Yad of the Mittler Rebbe and from the other Rebbe. So over there is, so again, that's a description of all sources from the Rebbeim which are directly related to Tanya, including many copies, and Rabbi Brook made sure to make the copies in the most beautiful and the best quality possible, in the color and so on and so forth. It's a very interesting skira. But that's the idea. The idea is to have a general description of all the sources which we have from the Rebbeim and the Tanya, which are referred directly to the Tanya itself, from which we took the Likutei Pirushim. Also from the Rebbe, there is some of the copies of some of the Hakoros and Shurim Sefer Tanya, and so on.
One of the integral components of being a chassid are the Chassidish Yomim Tovim and Yom Pagra. Whether it's Hey Tevis, Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Nisan, or Gimel Tammuz. These days give us an opportunity to connect with our Rabbeim, to connect with each other and be better Chassidim. What is the story behind each of these days? How did the Rebbe commemorate and celebrate these days? And most importantly, what are the lessons, the takeaways, and the action items Hamaisa Hua Ikr needed for each of these days? All of this and much, much more are answered in the new set recently published by Der Herr. Our Days is a journey through the Chabad calendar in story, meaning, and practice. With over 700 beautiful, glossy pages with elevated content, beautiful, beautiful photographs, you, your family, and friends will enjoy and live with each Chassidish Yom Tiv. This book is a must for every Lubavitcher home, for every shul, for every school. It is a perfect gift item. This will not collect dust. It will be used day after day, month after month, year after year. You can have this set. Go to derher.org/Our Days. Order your set today and start living with the Chassidish Yom Tov. Okay, we're there. When you were working on either the Shurim Sefer Tanya or the Ha'aris from the Rebbe, were there certain inyanim, chidushim, the way the Rebbe explained the Tanya, which sticks up? Give me, if you have any examples of something that sticks out, either that is different than when people thought pshat is, or something that you realized that was interesting to you while you were working on it, something that advar chiddush.
Okay, there are many, many of those. I'll say something very small, which I realized in that goes of Shurim and Shurim Sefer Tanya and the first Perek of Tanya. It's a small thing, but which I think it represents very strongly the Rebbe's look. So I like to repeat it. In the Perek Aleph of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is bringing proof that the tzaddik doesn't mean just someone who has more mitzvahs than averos, but means the whole complete different thing. Even a Beinoni has no averos, and the tzaddik is obviously someone who doesn't have Yetzer Hara. And he brings the proof. What's the proof? Because it says, Lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tzadikim she'em mu'atim. The Rebbe saw that there aren't many tzadikim around. So this shows that tzaddikim doesn't mean anyone who has more mitzvahs than averos, because there are many people that have more mitzvahs than averos. So here is the Haggadah and Shurim Sefer Tanya, where Rabbi Amber worked explanation. He explained it in simple terms. It says that Roa Kodesh Baruch Hu b'tzadikim she'em mu'atim. There are only a small number of tzaddikim, and therefore it doesn't fit with the criteria of Roiv Zchuyas, more mitzvahs than averos, because there are many of those. So the Rebbe added here a few words. I'm trying to remember the exact words, but feel matter. In other words, the Rebbe wanted to put the emphasize that when you are talking about Yidden who have more mitzvahs than averos, there is a great amount of such Yidden. The Rebbe I could look it up exactly. If you wait for a second, I'll see exactly what are the words. So we're here. The Rabbi Reinberg words the following words: that if tzaddik is someone who has anyone who has more mitzvahs than averos, why are we saying why are we saying that there is only a small amount of tzaddikim? Because many Yidden have more mitzvahs than averos. So the Rebbe added the following words: Viele, gor viele Yidden haben doch Zchuyas. In other words, you see, the Rebbe is not being, it's not such a big chiddush, but you see here, the Rebbe puts in his look on the Yid. It's not, you're saying, okay, there are more mitzvahs. Go feel a Yid. So many, the Rebbe here is Melamed Zchus and Klal Yisrael. Every single Yid in the world, so many Yidden have Roiv Zchuyas, more mitzvahs than Aviris. Go feel it. So, even though you could say, okay, that's not a Chiddush, the Rebbe is not bringing a Chiddush, but we did incorporate it as a pirush of the Rebbe and the Tanya, because that's something which shows the Rebbe's look on Yidden and on Klal Yisrael, and then the Rebbe puts it right in the first perek on Tanya. Or I give another example where the Rebbe is actually changing the pshat of the words along a similar line, and this is in Perek Zayin, where Perek Zayin is discussing the concept of Klippas Noiga, the Klippe, which is the way it's in different Oilamos. And the Rebbe is saying that in Olam Hazeh, Olam Hazeh is Rubei Kechulei Ra. Olam Hazeh is Rubei Kechulei, meaning vast majority. That's a simple meaning, Rubei Kechulei. Vast majority of Olam Hazeh is Ra, is evil. Rak me'at toiv me'ura v'seichel, there is only a very limited amount of good which is mixed into the klippe. So how do you understand generally the term Rubei Kechulei? Rubei Kechulei Ra. If you say Rubei Ra would mean majority is bad. You say Rubei Kechulei, not just majority, the biggest majority, the vast majority is bad. There's only just a little bit which is good. But again, the Rebbe here is changing the meaning. And again, in the second, I'll find the Rebbe's actual words. So again, the word Rubei Kechulei Ra, so Rabbi Weinberg translated, is die Klippe kimat in ganzen schlecht. It's almost completely bad. But the Rebbe added a few words. The Rebbe added, in gresten Teil. And now you read it, is die Klippe in gresten Teil kimat in ganzen schlecht. In other words, the Rebbe here is separating the Rubei from the Kechulei. And the Rebbe is saying, Rubei Kechulei means the majority of the Klippe is almost completely bad. In other words, don't take Rubei Kechulei as more than Rubei. Not the majority is bad, the vast majority is bad. No, Rubei Kechulei means the majority is almost completely bad. The minority is still good. And even the majority is only almost completely bad. In other words, Rubei Kechulei, the addition of Kechulei is really reducing how much evil is in there rather than increasing the amount of evil. Now again, this is a completely new pirush of the Rebbe and the words Rubei Kechulei. It doesn't mean vast majority, but it means the majority is almost completely. Again, this is incorporated in the printed Shurim B'Sefer Tanya, but it doesn't say that it's from the Rebbe. If you learn the Shurim B'Sefer Tanya from the Sefer, you would read through it and you wouldn't realize how the Rebbe is changing here completely the meaning of the word. I don't think anyone else knew anyone realized how to change the meaning of the words Rubei Kechulei from the vast majority to a majority being almost completely. So this is another example where the Rebbe is actually changing the meaning of the words and giving it a more positive tone. It's not almost completely bad, but on the contrary, even the majority which is bad is really only almost completely bad and not really completely bad. So that's just a few examples from the beginning of the Sefer Tanya of small changes which the Rebbe is saying, which are changing how we understand these words. Now, there are a few places that, in other words, those small changes, there are literally hundreds of them. That's just a few examples from the beginning. But there are some places where there is a Chiddush of the Rebbe, which is, I believe, at least by me, it changed the way I looked at the I don't know if it's Tanya in general, but at least at certain parts of the Tanya. And I will give one example for that. And this is from the beginning of Perek Lamed Hey in Tanya. Perek Lamed Hey is the beginning of a new section, where later in Perek Lamed Vav, introducing the concept of the Rebbe Tachtonim, this really begins in Perek Lamed Hey to explain the word of La'asoisoi, the importance of mitzvahs ma'asiyos, mitzvahs which are in action. And in the beginning of the Perek, the Alter Rebbe says that what's the purpose of this part of the Tanya? So one of the I will say, I'll quote Alter Rebbe's Loshen again. That's from the second volume. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, lehovin me'at mizeir tachlis bria sabeinonim v'yeridas nishmoyseim le'olam hazeh. Loma me'achar shelo yochlu l'shalcho, since there won't be those the Beinonim, since they are not able to completely defeat their nefesh habamis and to completely change it into good. So loma ze yordu nishmoyseim le'olam hazeh liga lorik chas v'shalom. Why did the neshamas came down to Elam Hazeh? It seems that they are working, everything which they do is in vain. They are not able to conquer the nefesh habamis. They just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. It's legal orik, that's in vain. And to explain that, I'll give you the whole concept of how important is the mitzvah ma'asiyos, because mitzvahs which are done with action, so they involve the nefesh habamis. So whenever you do a mitzvah which involves action, you're actually changing and elevating a certain part of the nefesh habamis. But let's focus on that question. The question: why did the Beinonim come down to Elam Hazeh, legal orik, to toil in vain? When you learn it, there are obvious questions. First of all, what do I mean? Why did they come down to Elam Hazeh? At the very beginning of Tanya, in Perek Daled, we already learned that Yofa Shorachas v'tshuva ma'asim tovim bo Elam Hazeh mikol chai Elam Haba, because Elam Haba, the most you have is Ziva Shechina, only a glow. Only in Elam Hazeh you could actually reach the Dovko boy, you could reach Dveikes with Zoyverster through learning Torah, especially learning Torah, which creates a Yichud Nifla, and for mitzvahs in general, you become one with the Overster. So what kind of question is, why did the Beinonim come down to Elam Hazeh? What do you mean? In Elam Hazeh they are gaining Torah, they are gaining mitzvahs, they are gaining Dveikes and Zoyverster, which you don't gain in higher elements. Why are they saying it's legal orik? Why is it to work in vain? That's one question. Additionally, okay, so you could say, yes, it's true that there is the advantage of coming down to Elam Hazeh to learn Torah and to fulfill, to be Mekayem mitzvahs. But for this, you don't need to be a Bein. You could be a tzaddik. A tzaddik is also learning Torah and also being Mekayem mitzvahs. So maybe the fact that they are not tzaddikim, that's lorik. Not the fact that they came down to Elam Hazeh. But the fact that they are Beinonim rather than tzaddikim, that's in vain. Because what are they gaining from being Beinonim? No. Actually, a few prokim before, in Perek Chof Zayin, that the Rebbe explains that the Eibishter has a special nachas from the avodah of a Beinoni. That the Eibishter has nei sugim atamim. The Eibishter desires two types of two flavors. There are the Madani Mesukim, there are the sweet flavor, which is provided by the tzaddikim, and then there is Ma'acholim, Charifim, the Chamutzim, things which are not naturally sweet. It's an acquired taste, so to say, but through avodah you are able to turn them into something which is a Ma'adanim, Lehoshiv Nefesh, and this is this is through that, and the Rebbe explains in Perek Chof Zayin how only the Beinoni through his avodah of Iskafye. So he is providing this type of special ma'adanim which the Rebbe desires. So we just explained what's the need for the Beinanim. The Beinanim, they are creating those ma'adanim lehoshi v'nefesh. They are fulfilling the Rebbe's desire for ma'adanim through their avodah niskafia. So why are we saying here that it's legal lorik, work in vain? So these are obvious questions, which obviously Rabbi Weinberg also discusses. And he gives various explanations. Each one of them is answering in a different way. And the Rebbe, first of all, he rejects Rabbi Weinberg's explanations. And the Rebbe says that the idea here is really hidden in one word. That the Rebbe is saying here, the Hovin me'at b'zeir tachlis brias b'inanim v'yeridas nishmeresem le'lam hazeh lehislabesh b'nefesh habamis. What's the purpose of the Beinanim coming down to Elam Hazeh and to be mislabesh in the Nefesh Habamis, to be enclosed, to be in the Nefesh Habamis? And that's the question over here. The question is not, why are you coming down to Elam Hazeh? If you're coming down to Elam Hazeh, there are many miles, there are many advantages in Elam Hazeh. There is Torah in Elam Hazeh. There is mitzvahs in Elam Hazeh. There is avodah in Elam Hazeh. No question why you came down to Elam Hazeh. Why you came down to Elam Hazeh as a Beinani also is understood. There is iskafia, as a Beinani you are fulfilling iskafia, you are able to fight the klippe, and you are causing the special iskafia tzracha, you are bringing great gilui, a great pleasure, the maila, a great tainug. The question is not why you came down to Elam Hazeh, and not even why you came down to Elam Hazeh as a Beinani. The question is why your nefesh ha'elokis, why your neshama had to be mislabish, had to be internalized inside nefesh habamis. Why the confusion? Why do I need to have such nefesh elokis, which is mixed in together with nefesh habamis? I don't always know what the nefesh elokis is, what the nefesh habamis is. If the purpose is iskafia, so let's have an nefesh elokis. Let's have an nefesh habamis outside, and then we have to fight the nefesh habamis. Why is this Islamshus? Why does the nefesh habamis have to be part of me? That's what Alter Rebbe is asking. In the name of the Beini, the Beini is asking, I have no problem with being in Elam Hazeh. I have no problem with not being a tzaddik. But why do I need a nefesh habamis as part of me? Why is my nefesh elokis needs to be mixed in together with nefesh habamis? You want iskafia? Give me nefesh elokis. Put the nefesh habamis outside, and I'll fight the nefesh habamis. Why is it that my nefesh elokis is involved, which makes my avodah much harder? It's not anymore. I don't even always know what nefesh elokis is saying, what nefesh habamis is saying. They're all part of my personality. It's all mixed in. This is legal lorik. This extra toil, extra work, which is caused by the Islamshus, by a Beinani is in vain. By a tzaddik, we understand. Why is there an Islamshus? Because through the Islamshus, the nefesh elokis is able to completely overcome nefesh habamis and turn it into good, and then turn it into kedusha. But I, a Beinani, which I'm not doing it. Why is this Islamshus? Why is my personality mixed in when nefesh elokis and nefesh habamis together without being able? Why is nefesh habamis part of me rather than being an outside force? And here, this question is only answered here. Why is nefesh habamis part of you? Because when nefesh habamis is part of you, it means that every single action which you take is involving the nefesh habamis. When you are being mekayem a mitzvah, it's not just the nefesh elokis doing it. It's using a koyches of shabamis. So every mitzvah which you are being mekayim, you are not only reaching the vekas with your nefesh elokis, you are also turning to kedusha a certain part of nefesh shabamis, even as a beinani, and not only in the tzaddik. And this is how you are fulfilling part of the kavanah of the Rebbe Tachtonim. In other words, from Perek Lamed Hey, based on this explanation of the Rebbe, from Perek Lamed Hey, the entire look at the Nefesh Habamis is different. Because until Perek Lamed Hey, we see the Nefesh Habamis as an enemy. That's what Nefesh Habamis is. It's an enemy. We have to fight it. If we're tzaddikim, we defeat it so strongly that we're either completely driving it out, or even we are turning it into kedusha. We are turning the enemy into a friend. If you are a beinani, so you keep fighting your enemy, you're hitting it, and you're hitting it, and you're hitting it, and you're never going to defeat it. That's before Perek Lamed Hey. From Perek Lamed Hey, the Nefesh Habamis is not anymore just the enemy. It's a goal. It's a purpose. The Nefesh Habamis is not only an object to be defeated, as an object to be used as part of your avodah to bring to the Rebbe Tachtonim. So this small explanation of the Rebbe is really gives us a whole new look on Nefesh Habamis from Perek Lamed Hey on. It becomes not an enemy, but part of the goal of our avodah. So, and that's one very strong example, and there are a few more where a small answer of the Rebbe, a small go of the Rebbe, is changing an entire look of a part of Tanya.
Okay, beautiful. Yeshikech for sharing that. I have a question that I'm thinking. I want to. Bechlal, this Tanya Hasholaim, so far I think it's another frontier in the hafatza of the Tanya, and it's going out. It's like a new shlav in the Tanya being available to the world, and everyone hears about Tanya and the Lamav Shachsidim. We're born with it. Tanya Balpeh from when you're a little kid, and what would you tell a person is the importance? Why do and a Lamav Shachsid also, that what is it about Tanya that they need? That why is that such a central thing that Tanya is needed for your life?
Yeah, that's more a question for a mashpia than to an editor of Tanya Hasholaim. That's not the. I wouldn't say it's a chiddush of the Tanya Hasholaim. Tanya Hasholaim is, in other words, the Tanya is important for your life, as I mentioned before, because this is the way. This is really. This is that Rebbe, as you said before, from Akdomas HaMelakit. The Tanya is the way that the Rebbe is telling you how to deal with your avodas Hashem. And the Rebbe saying himself, that's a continuation of Yechidus. That's the Rebbe, and the Rebbe giving you eitzes on your avodas Hashem. So maybe it could be said that if the Tanya itself is the eitzes of the Rebbe, with the Tanya Hasholaim, you are getting the eitzes of the Rebbeim in general, including the eitzes of our Rebbe. But generally speaking, the concept is that the Tanya is what tells the Chassid. That's the manual for avodas Hashem. You can't start your avodas Hashem without a Tanya. If you want to serve the Rebbe, the Tanya is the manual. Now, Tanya Hasholaim is adding to that also through the biurim and through the kirchus of the Rebbeim. But generally, that's the concept of Tanya. That's not that the chiddush of not Tanya Hasholaim and the ability to learn and understand Tanya, but the fact that the Tanya is the manual of instructions of how to serve the Rebbe. This was before Tanya Hasholaim, and it continues after Tanya Hasholaim.
Okay. So I just want to end off that I spoke to Rebbe Chaim Shaul, and I know that I believe that they printed 20,000 copies and it's sold out. You can't even buy it in any store. If you want to order it now, you have to pre-order because it's already being printed, second printing. And if you want to purchase a copy, you need to pre-order it for when it comes. After so many years of working on it, how do you feel about the fact that it was received so well and so quickly? And I mean, it's a lot of svarim to sell. How do you feel about that?
I can tell you this is one of the things which, especially Rabbi Brook was worried about it in the beginning. He said, okay, such a Tanya Hasholaim with Pirushim of the Rabbi, who is going to buy it? A few people are going to buy it. But you know what? I remember Rabbi Brook told me, I'm not doing it. I don't care how many people buy it. I know the Rebbe wanted to give it Tanya Hasholaim, so I'm doing it as a gift for the Rebbe, that the Rebbe wanted it to exist. So I'll do it, even though only a few people buy it. So I'll do it just as a gift for the Rebbe because the Rebbe wanted to have this kind of Tanya. Okay, but Baruch Hashem, it looks like I'm sure it helped the fact that Rabbi Brook wanted to make sure that the Tanya was easily affordable, and he was able to secure funding to sell it at a huge discount. So and the purpose was that, so that the Rebbe's Tanya reaches every home and every Yiddish house. But even that, I remember in the beginning when the Tanya started being sold, and within a few days, 5,000 sets were sold. So Rabbi Brook was very excited. We sold already 5,000 sets. I didn't think I would say so. I would sell so many 5,000 sets within a few days. Okay, but Baruch Hashem, looks like people are going into it and are buying it, and it was 5,000 within a few days, but 20,000 within a few weeks. And I'm sure a certain large part of the second edition is also already sold. So Baruch Hashem, that it's not only that the Rebbe's idea is being fulfilled, but the Rebbe's idea is reaching every Yiddish home, and probably many more Yiddish homes. That's definitely very exciting.
Okay, so I hope that this conversation that we're having will help the effort to get even more people involved. And if you're listening to this and you didn't purchase it, to make the pre-order. And thank you very much for your part in this. In this, I guess it's
Hatanya.com, I think, is the address.
Okay, Hatanya.com. And thank you for for being part of this Shlav and Afatza Samayanda. So thank you for the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Tatzlacha Rabba.